If you're in the market for a lightweight, more travel-friendly gimbal right now, there's a bunch of different options out there, and to know which one to pick could be pretty overwhelming. Now, DJI reached out to me and wanted me to compare their RSC2 to the Zhiyun Weebill 2, so that's what we're doing in today's video. Quick disclaimer, yes, they sent this through, but everything I'm talking about today is my experiences, my opinions, and they don't get any say on that. Now, yes, both of these gimbals have a whole host of features, but we're going to be talking about actual real-world use, how they function, how they handle, my experiences. Now, the most common modes that I and a lot of others use when shooting with gimbals is the follow mode, where if I tilt the gimbals up, the cameras follow. If I tilt or move them left, they go left. If I move them right, they go right. I'll often use the lock mode as well for slower, more precise shots where none of the axes actually follow my movements, and it's just like a slow push or pull shot. And I can get that on this one by holding down the trigger. It's a bit more subtle, but those are really the only two kinds of shots that I use. Let's take a look at how the video looks from each of these doing the same kinds of shots with some help from someone you might know. As you can tell from the video, both of those are fantastic. We're kind of like peak gimbal phase now, where all of them do a pretty good job at keeping things smooth in all the different modes that they offer. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I've tried out a ton of different gimbals, and one annoyance that I used to come across all the time is if you want to use your own base plate or your own mounting system, like I like to use Arca Swiss and put a base plate on top of the plate that comes with gimbals, then you'll know if you do that and then you put the camera in a cage, the center of gravity just becomes too high for lightweight gimbals, and even though they'd be under the weight limit, it would be impossible to balance. Now, both the RSC2 and Weebill 2 do not suffer from this. I'm able to attach my own mounting system to this, so they do go a little bit higher. They're both in cages, and they both balance excellently and very easily. Now, the normal weight limits for both of these are 3 kilograms. Normal means you can expect to get advertised battery life, which is 14 hours on the RSC2 and 9 hours on the Weebill 2. Now, with that said, 3 kilograms is actually pretty heavy. The 50mm f1.2 GM with the FX3 in a cage is just under 2 kilograms, and that's a pretty heavy setup. Don't imagine you're going to want to have it much heavier than that, just because it's not going to be very easy to carry about. Most gimbal designs these days are pretty similar, meaning if you know how to balance one gimbal, you could probably do most. With that said, let's take a look at how to balance each of these gimbals from start to finish in real time. So we're going to be balancing both gimbals. We're going to start with the Ronin RSC2 before moving on to the Weebill 2. Now, I'm going to be balancing with the plates that come with each of the gimbals, but you can, of course, use your own plate on top of this plate too. All that video you saw at the beginning, that was actually using that method. So it does work that way too. The reason I want to show you the one that comes with the DJI RSC2 specifically is because this plate actually has a useful feature. You can see that it slides in here, and then it kind of comes to a stop, and then you just lock it. That's really useful because if you're taking the camera on and off of the gimbal a lot, you might find if you put it back on and it's slightly off position to how it was on before, your balance is off, now you have to rebalance the whole thing. So this means that basically it goes onto exactly the same spot every single time, and that way you don't have to rebalance it, which is pretty useful. So let's get this back to the right way around. And now we're going to balance both of these gimbals, starting with the RSC2. So the first thing that I like to balance is, it's actually pretty balanced there. The first thing I like to balance is this axis right here. So you see that it's moving this way, so that means I need to bring it back this way. So we're going to do that by sliding this across right here. So it's stationary, it doesn't move on its own like that. Now I'm going to see how this moves. So it's moving back that way, so I need to bring it forwards, but I am going to do it this way, just as easier for me. So it's moving this way, I need to move it back that way. And we do that by loosening off right here. Loosen that off, and just little tiny movements, just until it stops moving. Don't need to do like big slides or anything like that. That's going to really put it off balance. Just little tiny adjustments is all you need to do until it doesn't move. A little bit too far, a little bit too far, a little tiny adjustment, Little tiny adjustment, and that's it, good. All right, so now we lock that off there. And now we need to do the roll axis. So you can see that it's rolling this way, so I need to move it back this way. And we do that by loosening off the knob just here. And so it's falling left, I need to push it right. So we slide that out, just ever so slightly, until it doesn't move. Nope, still angling that way a little bit. That's pretty good. Okay, so tying that off. And now we need to do the pan axis. So this works by, so you see when you turn it like this and it still moves ever so slightly, it's not perfect. I mean, you could use it like that, but as it's moving a little bit, you want to adjust it. So just kind of move it in a little bit. And you see how now it doesn't really adjust. Let me show you how that would look if it was really off. So let's pull that all the way out. It moves really quick. That means it's completely off balance. So let's move that back to how it was. If it moves a little slowly, then you're okay. The idea is to not have it move at all. So there we go, that's it. Ready to go. Gimbal is balanced and we're going to turn it on. There you go, fully balanced with the DJI Ronin RSC2. Let's jump ahead to balancing the Weebill 2. All right, so now we've got the Weebill 2 and the plate for the Weebill 2 attached to the camera. We're gonna slide it in and we are going to balance it. Okay, that's locked in there. Just lock that one off. And the first axis I always do, like I did with the other one, is this axis right here. So you see it's falling this way, it means I need to move it that way. So I do that by adjusting right here. So I'll loosen off this knob here and I just need to basically push it down. I have to do it this way just because it's easier for me. Let go, still moving that way, a little bit more, still moving that way, a little bit more, little tiny adjustments as I said, nothing major. You do big adjustments and you're just gonna be taking 2 steps backwards. So there we go. Lock that off. Okay, now we need to do the axes. Oh, that's actually pretty good. So let's loosen it just to see. So if it was falling forwards violently like that, you need to bring it back. So loosen this off, pull this back until it just sits almost or stationary on its own, like that. Lock that off. And now we're gonna do the axes this way. It's falling that way, so I need to push it this way, and I do that by loosening on the bottom there. It's still a little bit too much. Now that's too far that way. Still too far the other way. A little bit more. That's pretty good. So now I'm gonna lock that off right there. And you see, oh, it's a little bit off still. Let's loosen that a little bit more. I do like it to be pretty perfect. There we go, that's good, okay. Tighten you off there. And now we need to do the final axis, which is this way. And you see it's moving a little bit there. So loosen it off, bring it in ever so slightly. Try that again. That's pretty good. Is it? Yeah. That's pretty good. Okay, get the gimbal back to where it's meant to be, like that. Turn it on with the button just here. There we go. Weebill 2, balance. Both these gimbals are actually made pretty well and they both feel pretty premium. We're past that stage of like cheap plastics now with gimbals, which I'm very, very thankful for. The RSC2 is made of aluminium alloy with some heavy duty rubber on the handle here, which is really good for its grip. And then the Weebill 2 is made much of the same, but it does also have little bits of plastic scattered around in it too. And that being said, it isn't cheap plastic, it's pretty premium, high quality feeling plastic. Both of these gimbals have locks on all the axes now, which is really useful. I'm glad that's like a standard now for gimbals. Essentially, it means you can lock the axes and it will not move there. You can unlock it then when you want to use it. That just makes things a lot easier for packing away, putting into a bag, or for traveling. Now, both of these gimbals do come with carry bags, which are pretty high quality. They've got nice handles on them. We're far past that like polystyrene style case that you get now, which is a good thing. I will say though that those kinds of bags, I'm not going to be using them personally. You can fold the gimbals up and they do go in there with a bunch of accessories, but I'm more inclined to know if it's going to fit into a bag or onto a bag that I'm out and about carrying all day instead. So here's an example of that. What I want to try and do is fit both of these gimbals with a camera into the bags that I use most often, and they are the Peak Design everyday bag, the 20 litre, 25 litre, the smaller of the two, and also the Low Pro ProTactic 450AW version 1. Yes, I still have the first version, still love it. So let's try with the Ronin RSC2 first. Now that is it all folded up.
just so you can see by comparison, the Weebill 2 doesn't fold up quite as small there. So this is definitely a little bit smaller, probably will fit in the bag a little bit easier. So I've made a bit of a bigger compartment on the top there, that will go in there. And then one of these cameras, I mean, they're both pretty much the same size, 24 G Master on this one, 1635 f4 on this. And that will slot into there nice and easy, no problem whatsoever. Lots of room for other things in there too if you wanted to. Let's try with the Peak Design bag. So I kind of think it might fit into the top there. Yep, no problem. That can go in there, close that up. And then the camera will probably slot just inside there. Yeah, it will. So that goes in there. Whole day shoot in one bag, nice and easy. Weebill 2, as I said, definitely bigger than the Ronin RSC2 when it's folded up there, just because of that part there that doesn't fold up, whereas the design on the Ronin does, of course, fold up. So let's try with the Peak Design first. Will it fit into this compartment? It's a little bit longer. So it will. Yeah, it will. On a slight angle there, it's kind of sticking out the side, so it might protrude out the side of the bag there. We need those two handles and then the camera. So let's see. Yeah, so it does. It fits in there nice and easy, no problem whatsoever. It sticks out a little bit on the side there, but still goes in. And I'm sure it's going to fit into this bag as well, but just so we can see. Out you come. Into the bottom just there. Of course, they both have the locks on all the axes, which I'm glad they do, because that just makes things a lot easier to pack. So there you go, yeah, it goes into there, no problem. So both of these are very travel friendly. They go into two very common, widely used bags.
Now the RSC2 is actually slightly lighter at 1.2 kilograms versus the Weebill 2, which comes in at 1.47 kilograms. It's not a huge difference, but it's good to know. Now both of these gimbals have an underslung, or as DJI calls it, briefcase mode, which essentially allows you to shoot lower angle shots. And the way that they do it is actually quite a bit differently. So let's take a look first with the Weebill 2. So as you can probably tell here, this handle is what's going to become your underslung mode. That's the handle for shooting your lower angle shots. Now this handle actually comes apart from the gimbal itself. You pull down this here, unlock it, and then on the back here there's a button to release it, and then it just slides straight off. So that is how you do underslung mode on the Weebill 2. On the Ronin RSC2, it's very unique. On the side here there is a knob that you loosen off. And this is where it feels like you're almost breaking it, but it's completely designed to do this. Grab on tight here, and then you see how it angles down like that. And now you tighten this up. And that is now my underslung mode. It's very unique, very different. I've never seen anything like that. And then when you want to go back to your regular mode, again, loosen this off. And as you can see, it holds it very, very firmly there. So I'm quite impressed by the way that that works. Tightly pull that down. Clicks back in, tighten it back up again, and then that's how you get back to your regular mode. Double tap and it just returns to normal. So they both have that underslung or briefcase mode, they just approach it in different ways. Both of these gimbals have the ability to use follow focuses for manual focus lenses, or if you like to manually focus instead. I use Sony cameras and the autofocus is incredible. I rarely use manual focus lenses, so I don't really use follow focuses with gimbals. Now both gimbals also offer the ability to do image transmission, but something to know, both the follow focus and image transmission parts don't come with the basic gimbal kits for each of these, for which the RSC2 costs $499 for the basic kit and the Weebill 2 costs $549 for the basic kit. Now the most important thing about a gimbal is how it functions when you're using it. It can have every feature under the sun, but if it doesn't work well or it's a nightmare to use, you're not going to want to use it, and then what's the point in having it? Now I'm happy to say that both these work very well in their own ways, but let's take a look a little bit closer at some things that stood out to myself. Now the Ronin RSC2 has a couple of different ways to control it and change modes. It shows you everything you need on the screen right here. To change modes directly on the gimbal itself, you have 3 different presets to assign in spots M1, M2, and M3. You could assign follow mode to M1, FPV to M2, you get the idea. You can change basic settings on the gimbal itself by the clickable scroll wheel on the side right here. But if you want to get in a little bit deeper and start customizing things and tweaking things, fine-tuning them a little bit more, like in M1, M2, and M3, you do need to load up and use the app. Now I hate having to rely on apps for the functionality of a product. I've had the Ronin S though for nearly 2 years, and it relies on an app as well, and I have to say it's worked flawlessly the entire time I've had it, and it looks like it works exactly the same with the Ronin RSC2 as well. The app connects automatically every single time. I've never had any issues with it, and when you make a change, it's immediate. Now the Weebill 2 has a few different ways to control it. Again, it does have an app like the Ronin RSC2, but the app for this takes at least 3 different taps of buttons to get you to connect to it, and then there is a bit of a delay, so it's not automatic, and it definitely takes a little bit more time. The app is not as well designed and doesn't offer the same detailed customization as the Ronin app. For me, this isn't a huge deal because I don't need these precise little things, but for others it could be, and it's something you should be aware of. Now the Weebill actually has a unique feature which I've never seen before on a gimbal, and it's this little thing here, and if you don't know what this is actually a screen, and it's very firm there. It does sit in there nice and flush, and it doesn't interfere with this whatsoever. You can see there's a tiny little gap there, but it doesn't interfere with it at all. And this is another method for changing your modes. It's very straightforward, it's very easy to use, it's simple touchscreen, and the touch is very responsive. It's got to be the same kind of technology that we have in our iPhones because it feels as responsive as that. So it is very well designed, but it makes me beg the question, is something like this necessary? Do we need a screen or another screen on here? Now hold that thought, because there is another use for this which we'll talk about in a second. With gimbals and the kind of work that I do, I think that speed and simplicity is key. I want to turn the gimbal on, I want to get the shot I need, and that's it. Now you do have a little 3-way selector switch on here for going between different modes, pan, follow, lock, and follow to quickly change, which I'm really happy that they included for quick mode changes, because otherwise you would be forced into using this screen. Now with the image transmission system, which you can get with this in the Pro kit, you can actually use this screen for viewing what your camera is viewing too. But I think that's kind of a gimmick. I already have a flip screen up here for being able to angle and do low angle shots and high angle shots. So why do I need another flip screen on my camera right here? Now yes, there is tracking built into this as well, but most of the time if you're using a gimbal, you're holding and moving it. So why do you need tracking in there unless you're shooting on your own? So I can appreciate, yes, if you are shooting on your own, that there's a use for this screen with the tracking, but it's an incredibly niche one, and I don't think the whole design of this gimbal should be centered around that little niche. Something I like that I've never used before is you can remotely control camera settings on both these gimbals by using the supplied cable for your camera. Now for Sony, that is USB-C to C, but it comes with the Canon versions, the Fuji, Nikon, whatever camera you have, you're gonna be able to control it. Now on the Ronin RSC2, it connects right into the front here, and then into the side of the camera via the USB-C. And then the front dial here can be mapped to various things. Now I have it set to my ISO. Now I can start and stop recording on the front with the red record button and control my ISO without even having to touch the camera. You can do exactly the same thing on the Weebill 2 with the port just on the top here, and then again onto this side of the FX3 into the USB-C. On the Weebill 2, you are actually mapping it to this little knob instead, opposed to a dial on the front there, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So you can control ISO, aperture, focus if you're using a Followfocus with it. All the same things, you can map this dial on the front of this one too. Now here's an interesting one though. Are you left or right-handed when it comes to using gimbals? And I ask because it does matter with both these. On the RSC2, you can see everything is kind of in the middle there. So it doesn't matter which hand you're using, you can control the joystick, record button, everything there. Or if this one, joystick, you can get to everything pretty easily. You can reach it with your thumb, whatever, there's no problem. If you're a left-handed gimbal holder though, you're automatically gonna see a problem with this one. If you're holding it with your left hand, there's no way to control it. There isn't. You have to use your right hand. That's the only way you can access it. And even then, these buttons aren't the easiest to access. Like, you really have to stretch your thumb. The joystick there, I'll give them that. That's easy to control. The trigger, easy to control. But then if you want to even control this, you have to use a second hand. So it might not be a big deal for you to use two hands, but this can be done entirely one-handed, whereas this, you need that second hand. In the past, when I've tested gimbals, I've always had issues with horizon drift, where it's perfectly balanced, you set it up perfectly, it's calibrated, it's good to go, but it's still like slightly crooked. Happy to report they're not an issue with either of these. It was never a big problem before. You could easily correct it in post, but you have to twist it or angle it by a degree and then crop in a little bit, and it was a pain, but no issues like that with either of these guys. As I've said before, when it comes to me with gimbals, I like them to be simple, easy to use, and just get the job done. But once you've got your gimbal set up, you've got all your settings dialed in, you don't normally find yourself going into and changing the settings around in the apps or on the gimbals themselves a huge amount. I was happy with the original Ronin with not having a screen and just 3 modes and an LED, so you're either in mode 1, 2, or 3. So I think DJI has really nailed it with the RSC2 with the little screen on there, giving you everything you really need to see, but not really overwhelming you. You might like the idea of a screen on the Weebill too, and you might see a use for it, but for me, I just kind of find it unnecessary, and I like things uncomplicated and efficient. So there we go, the Ronin RSC2 versus the Weebill 2. That's what I think. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.